Take a look. We've got some of our Christmas party pictures from yesterday.
Our karaoke, right?
Ain't no party like a Fox and Friends party.
That's right. Yesterday we celebrated the holidays, our annual office Christmas party with some karaoke. Look at this.
No, we're not going to look at that.
No, we're not going to show you that.
Next year, we're bringing the Big Apple Circus with us. Absolutely.
Yes.
I got the stills.
Have a great weekend. Happy Friday.
Nicely done. We had a dose of our own action yesterday. Good morning, everybody. Trump versus Cohen. New reaction now for the president and his former attorney. The accusations are flying. We say hello on a Friday. I'm Bill Hemmer, live inside of America's Newsroom. And you?
Good Friday
nice
morning,
to see you,
Bill.
dear.
I'm Sandra Smith. Good morning, everyone. Michael Cohen going after his former boss this morning in an interview with George Stephanopoulos. His first since being sentenced to 3 years in prison. Cohen claiming the president directed him to organize hush money payments to 2 women during the 2016 campaign.
I don't think there's anybody that believes that. First of all, nothing at the Trump Organization was ever done unless it was run through Mr. Trump. He directed me, as I said in my allocution, and I said as well in the plea, he directed me to make the payments. He directed me to become involved in these matters.
So that interview aired this morning, a day after this interview with Harris Faulkner, and a complete opposite telling of that story.
I never directed him to do anything wrong. Whatever he did on his own. He's a lawyer. A lawyer who represents a client is supposed to do the right thing. That's why you pay them a lot of money, et cetera, et cetera. He is a lawyer. He represents a client. I never directed him to do anything incorrect or wrong. And he understands that.
Laura Ingle leads our coverage this morning, starting off here in New York City. Laura, good morning.
Good morning, Bill. Well, Michael Cohen breaking his silence with this interview, also accusing the president of trying to influence the 2016 presidential election with those payments, while giving the public a look behind the scenes at what he says was going on when those deals were being made.
You have to remember at what point in time that this matter came about, 2 weeks or so before the election, post the Billy Bush comments. So yes, he was very concerned about how this would affect the election.
To help his campaign.
To help him and the campaign.
Now, you'll remember the Billy Bush comments referenced there were between the Access Hollywood host and then Citizen Trump in 2005, which captured the men in a hot mic conversation that was released to the public in October of 2016, in which Mr. Trump is heard bragging about kissing and groping women. Now, the president's former personal lawyer and fixer telling ABC Trump personally directed him to make those hush money payments to 2 women, former Playmate Karen McDougal and porn star Stormy Daniels, who both claimed to have affairs with Mr. Trump before he ran for office, which he has denied. And Cohen says he was showing blind loyalty to Mr. Trump as he arranged the payouts. Cohen was sentenced to 3 years in prison Wednesday by a federal judge in New York on tax evasion, campaign finance violations in connection with those deals, and for lying to Congress about what he knew about President Trump's intentions to complete a real estate deal in Russia. Cohen was asked in the interview why anyone should believe him now, since he already has admitted to lying.
The special counsel stated emphatically that the information that I gave to them was credible and helpful. There's a substantial amount of information that they possess that corroborates the fact that I am telling the truth.
So you're done with the lying?
I am done with the lying. I am done being loyal to President Trump.
And President Trump has pushed back against the accusations and says they are being made to make him look bad. Michael Cohen said in the interview he will not be the villain of this story. Bill.
Laura Ingle leading our coverage here in New York. Thank you, Laura. More to come on this, certainly. Sandra.
Meanwhile, President Trump not mincing words about Cohen in a Fox News interview. White House correspondent Kevin Corke live from the North Lawn this morning. Kevin, is there any reaction from the White House that we're hearing so far this morning?
Well, the sort of reaction that you might expect, obviously, sort of pursed lips and rolled eyes, at least among the staff. Meanwhile, a full-throated refutation from the president himself, who obviously is feeling very strongly about the fact that this is a man that he paid handsomely, he allowed into his inner circle, and he is obviously now flipped. Now, I mentioned that he's in the president's inner circle. Very interesting, because yesterday the president told our Harris Faulkner apparently that didn't take very much.
He was on a committee, it was a condominium committee many years ago, and he was a very big supporter of mine on that committee. I did a great job, Trump World Tower, it's a very tall building right opposite the United Nations. I liked him, and he was a lawyer, and because of that, I did it. And you know what? In retrospect, I made a mistake.
Listen to that. For those who've said the president never admits when he's wrong, he said right there, when it came to hiring Cohen, I made a mistake. Very interesting. Sandra?
Kevin, what do we know about this inaugural committee investigation?
Yeah, a death by 1,000 cuts or 1,000 lawsuits and investigations. That's sort of how it's being seen here at the White House, which is to say, this is something I don't think many people have ever even heard of, to say nothing of an actual federal prosecutor taking a look at it. This all goes back to the now famed, it was bigger than it looked, inauguration. You saw the crowds there, and there is a very strong question now among investigators about whether or not the Trump inauguration committee misspent some of the record $107 million it raised from donations.
The federal investigation into the inauguration.
I need to answer that one last question. On the inaugural committee, that doesn't have anything to do with the president or the first lady. The biggest thing the president did in his engagement in the inauguration was to come here and raise his hand and take the oath of office. The president was focused on the transition during that time and not on any of the planning.
Okay, so Sandra, this is a fairly lengthy statement. I'll try to blast through it as quickly as I can. This is on behalf of the 58th Presidential Inaugural Committee. The PIC's finances were fully audited internally and independently and are fully accounted. Moreover, the inauguration's accounting was provided both to the Federal Election Commission and the IRS in compliance with all laws and regulations. These funds were raised from private individuals and were then spent in accordance with the law and the expectations of the donors. The names of donors were provided to the FEC and have been public for nearly 2 years, and those donors were vetted in accordance with the law, and no improprieties have been found regarding the vetting of those donors. So what I think you're seeing here, and this is what was said to me by senior staffer this morning, she said, sort of like what's happening with the Ninth Circuit, which has been sort of trying to disrupt the Trump legal agenda out west. You're seeing the Manhattan office, the Southern District of New York, now apparently targeting the Trump orbit here in the east. But she also said they will remain strong. Sandra?
And Kevin, the president is said to be whittling down the candidates for chief of staff. Where do you think stand on that this morning?
Oh, yeah. So it's not Ayers, it's not Mulvaney, it's not you, it's not me, but that list is now apparently down to 5 people. Listen, as I've shared with you previously, the president will make this decision on his own. This won't be sort of a decision by committee. Still, trying to replace the chief of staff, John Kelly, is a very important opportunity for this White House. For a couple of reasons, Sandra. Number one, you want to make sure you have someone who can make the trains run on time. But number two, and this is key, you want to make sure that you have someone who can manage the president as well. So, yeah, this list is fluid with big names coming and going by the minute.
We're interviewing people now for chief of staff, yes. 5 people, really good ones, terrific people, mostly well-known, but terrific people.
Terrific people. Sandra Smith.
He's another one.
Right
terrific
back at you,
person
buddy.
right there.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin. With us now, Charlie Hurd, another terrific person. Opinion editor, Washington Times, Fox News contributor. Charlie, how you doing? You watched
morning, Bill.
the Cohen interview. What did you make of it this morning on ABC?
Well, I thought it was really interesting. Perhaps probably the highlight for me was his explanation for why people should believe him now after he's admitted to lying to Congress and admitting to lying in other circumstances. His basic argument was, well, you got to believe me because Bob Mueller believes me. Well, obviously every prosecutor wants to believe their any cooperating witness they have, but that doesn't really sort of cut it. If the question is he believable to a federal judge? Is he believable to a jury? And I think the jury is obviously still out on that one.
On the Russia matter, et cetera, I thought there was a lot left on the table. I don't know how much he could talk about that or not. My sense is with the Southern District in New York, when he said, you don't know what else they have, essentially what he said. They've got a lot more material. My antenna went up trying to think, well, what is next and what could they possibly pursue then? That seemed to me to be the biggest danger from that interview. Your reading on that?
Well, certainly the sprawling nature of these investigations, and not just the Mueller one in particular. When you get into the inaugural committee, the report out of the Wall Street Journal that the inaugural committee is being investigated, none of which has to do with the original question, which had to do with collusion with Russia. It begins at some point. It begins to sort of wear on people, and they get kind of. I think people probably are already sort of exhausted of all these.
Well, that's the danger of a special counsel, right? You don't know where it goes, and we've known that from the beginning.
Absolutely. And the other danger, again, going back to Michael Cohen in this particular case with the inaugural committee, apparently, and we don't know much about this investigation. In fact, the committee itself hasn't even, according to them, hasn't even been notified that there are questions being asked. A little bit delusional at this point. I think that Michael Cohen has not done anything to quite bring the country back together yet, but he can keep trying. We can all keep trying.
Thank you, Charlie. Have a great weekend. See you next week. Charlie Herther in Washington. Thank you, Sandra.
We're going to have much more on that Michael Cohen interview. White House Deputy Press Secretary Hogan Gidley you heard Kevin Corke at the White House. A lot to wrap up what has been a very eventful week for that.
Also, you've got a deadline later this afternoon. That judge in Virginia wants the special counsel to turn over all this information as to what they told Michael Flynn and what they did and all that. So that's coming up today, too.
All right. Meanwhile, there's this.
We stopped thousands of special interest aliens at the border last year, thousands of criminals. We know there's criminals in this flow. The need for the wall has never been clearer. Wall's work.
So will Congress get a deal done? And what does it mean for the thousands of migrants at the border? Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton will join us next.
Also, we are 2 days removed attack at a Christmas market. Police in France now in a shootout with the accused.
Not backing down.
From the administration, all three last evening, the White House doubling down on border security. What is next now for thousands of migrants waiting in Tijuana to seek asylum? Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton is with us now. And sir, welcome back to America's Newsroom. What happens to them?
Well, I think you're talking about the migrants in Tijuana. It's going to be a slow process. They were told from the beginning they weren't going to be let in, and so they're going to go through a very, very slow process, unfortunately.
Well, what message do you think that sends down the line to these other Central American countries?
I think it sends the right message that, look, you've been told you can just walk in this country. That's not going to happen. President Trump isn't going to let that happen, and so hopefully it stops. It sends the right incentives, which is don't make that trek. It's dangerous, and you're not getting in.
Okay, there are 1,700 members of the U.S. military that are going home. Is that mission accomplished or complete for now for them?
So my understanding is what they were doing was logistics. They were setting up fences and trying to secure the border. That they've accomplished a lot of their engineering tasks, and there's no reason to keep them there. Let them go on and do other projects.
All right, you're in Washington, right? So you're in the
correct.
thick of this border wall battle now. What do you think comes of it?
You know, I am hopeful. I'm always hopeful. It's necessary. We've done it before. We did it along the border of El Paso and Juarez. It worked. There's certainly no reason we can't do it again. So, you know, I'm always optimistic that some way, somehow, these guys in Congress will get their act together and do the right thing.
Well, you're optimistic, huh? Kirstjen Nielsen was on last hour, Department of Homeland Security, and this is how she characterized the opposition to it now.
This is just a terrible example of politics at its worst. Democrats have voted for the wall before. In fact, they appropriated money for the wall just last year. Nothing has changed. In fact, the numbers have gone up. The security risks have gone up.
I don't think you disagree with that, being at the forefront of this issue. The other thing she said is that we have been the most effective when we find the smugglers' routes and we gum them up and we stop them. And that would be the objective, at least initially, with additional money. What is your sense from your border state of Texas on that?
Well, there's no doubt that that would be useful to my state. I mean, we deal with the crime, we deal with the smuggling, we deal with human trafficking every day. That's why this is an issue that I wish the Democrats and Republicans would work on together. it literally affects the lives of thousands of people in my state and their safety.
Why aren't they?
You know, politics, it literally makes no sense. There's no downside to protecting our border. There's no downside to protecting our citizens. That's what the primary job of our government is to protect our citizens, and they're frankly just not doing it.
I'm going to take you back to earlier in the week from the Oval Office. You know the moment, you watched it. Here's a quick recap for our viewers.
The one thing I think we can agree on is we shouldn't shut down the government over a dispute. And you want to shut it down. You keep talking about it.
The last time, Chuck, you shut it down.
No.
We don't get what we want, one way or the other, whether it's through you, through a military, through anything you want to call, I will shut down the government.
Okay,
absolutely.
fair enough.
And I am
disagree.
proud, and I'll tell you what, I am proud to shut down the government for border security.
Who do you think got the better of that argument? It's been debated all week, sir.
Well, look, the Democrats have shut down the government many times. They've used it effectively. Now we're going to find out if President Trump can use it effectively being president of the United States. I think it's worth it. I think it's worth the safety of our citizens, and I think ultimately, if the president sticks to this, I think he'll prevail.
Yeah. Would you like to have him, instead of just doing that message we saw online, maybe talk from the Oval Office or the Roosevelt Room and explain to the American people why he's taking the position he's doing? Because I think it would be worthy to do that.
No, I agree with you. I think that would be that'd be a great idea, because I think that message resonates with most Americans. It's safety. It's pure and simple safety and protecting the people of our country, and I think most Americans want that.
It could happen next week. Sir, thank you for your time. Ken Paxton from Texas and Washington today. Thank you, sir. Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Have a great day. Merry Christmas.
You bet. Thank you. Sandra.
All right, well, the bloody end to a manhunt for French police finally tracked down the suspect in that deadly terror attack at a Christmas market.
Also, more protests planned against the French government over the weekend. President Macron tries to ease the tensions in his country.
Suspect wanted in a deadly Christmas market attack. Last night's shootout in Strasbourg ending in intense manhunt for the accused killer. This as yellow vest protesters prepare for another weekend of anti-government demonstrations in Paris, fueled by high taxes and low wages. President Trump sounding off about this yesterday.
The Paris Accord is not working out too well for Paris. Take a look at what's happening over there. Because of the Paris Accord, that whole country is burning down, okay? So, and I was the one that kept us out of the Paris Accord. If I was in the Paris Accord, we would be paying trillions of dollars for nothing. And I wouldn't do that.
Greg Palcott's live in Paris. Greg, are people in France feeling more secure now that this terrorist has been killed?
I think there is a large sigh of relief here, Sandra, in France, a place that has seen a lot of terrorism after the man who killed 3 and injured 13 has been, in the words of police, neutralized. This came at the end of a 2-day manhunt involving 700 police and soldiers in and around that eastern French city of Strasbourg. Apparently, police got a tip late last night, local time, cornered him in one doorway. He shot, they gunned him down. The 29-year-old French native of Algerian parents was described to us as a thug in and out of jail for years. We were told he only recently radicalized. Today, police are looking for an accomplice. As an act of defiance, the Christmas market in that city where the shooting took place reopened today. The mayor of that city saying it's feeling like we're back alive again, Sandra.
Greg, we understand more protests are expected for tomorrow.
Yeah, we saw the violence last week firsthand, Sandra, and guess what? Here we go again from everybody that we've been talking to here in Paris. Again, it's the yellow vest protests, possible violence. They're fighting lower taxes, high wages. Stores and restaurants are going to be shut down again. That's a huge economic cost, but just to be sure, police will be out in the same kind of force numbers we saw last week. 8,000 in Paris alone, armored vehicle. This time, they say they'll be super targeting those individuals who are trying to wreck everything. Remember, President Macron earlier this week went on TV, made some concessions to the people, but the people apparently want more. Here is what the editor of the noted Paris Match magazine told us earlier today.
Deeply rooted in certain category of people, especially it's the middle class, the French middle class siding towards poverty, and that's the very dangerous sign of, possible unrest and a movement that could be lasting for quite a while.
He tells us we might see a break during the Christmas time. The folks here like this holiday period just like everybody else, but at least for this coming weekend, it's going to be tough and maybe restarting in January. Back to you, Sandra.
Greg Palcott in Paris. Thank you.
Something to keep an eye on there. Watch this, too. It's Friday. Hamas calls for a day of rage. Tensions escalating in the Gaza Strip. We got a live report from the Middle East on what's happening today. Straight ahead.
Plus, some good news in those trade negotiations with China. We'll see what happens when markets open just a couple minutes from now.
Stand by on that. Tempers flaring on the Hill as the threat of a shutdown.
The government is stupid. Shutting down the government is costly.
He says that the American public want to make sure it stays open. Yeah, we do too. The American public also wants to make sure we're safe.
As the administration tries to hash out a deal with Beijing. Now that we're watching the Dow this morning, a Friday morning after another wild week on Wall Street, and here you have it 2 minutes into trading and a nearly 300-point sell-off on the big board. China also just reported some what are being perceived as some pretty ugly numbers as far as their economy, and the ugly numbers are being attributed to the trade war, and that is sending a negative signal to not just U.S. stocks, but to the global stock market.
Charles Payne just sent an email a couple minutes ago about the China economy growing much slower than expected, so that's having a lot of weight right here on us home. Just about 1%, you know, I mean, heck. We watch this thing, right, just about every day. So we'll see where we go today.
So that economic data out of China was their industrial production growth. It fell 5.4%. Sorry, I should say it's just like our GDP number. It slowed to 5.4%. That's its lowest level since 2009.
They've been cooking for a long time, right? Here at home, U.S. consumers are apparently still spending money because retail sales for the month of December are really good too. So we'll shake all that down with Charles Payne next hour. I'll let you know what you need to know coming up.
All right, that's coming up.
Meanwhile, Middle East now, Israeli forces arresting dozens of Hamas activists in the West Bank overnight. This after 2 deadly shootings blamed on the terror group, and Hamas is now calling for supporters to participate in a day of rage. Trey Yinks is live from Ramallah on the West Bank for more on that. Trey.
Bill, just moments ago, Israeli forces were able to recapture the road behind me at the entrance of Ramallah, where clashes erupted following a week of heavy violence in the West Bank. Overnight, Israeli forces arrested 40 Hamas members here after a shooting yesterday left 2 Israeli soldiers dead. And last weekend, 7 Israelis were wounded and a baby killed in a similar attack. The scene here today was filled with tear gas as protesters lit tires on fire. We also understand, according to reports, there were heavy clashes along the Israel-Gaza border, where at least 10 people were wounded by live ammunition and 1 person reportedly killed. All of this coming as Hamas, as you noted, Bill, has called for a day of rage following this week filled with violence. And the backdrop of all of this, Bill, having to do with the Trump administration's peace plan that is set to be rolled out in the coming months. What we have seen so far here today indicates that things on the ground are approaching a much more violent and volatile situation rather than approaching peace, which has been discussed here extensively over the past few months between the Israelis and Palestinians. Bill?
Thank you, Trey. We're watching it throughout the afternoon there as the day grows longer. Trey Yinks there. Thanks in Ramallah.
Meanwhile, the border battle continues, and certainly the rhetoric continues to heat up in Washington with the threat of a government shutdown next week. Watch this fiery exchange on the House floor between Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy and Minority Whip Steny Hoyer.
We have brought 2 major immigration reform bills to this floor, and not one person on the other side of the aisle voted for either.
We didn't vote for it because we didn't like your bills. But you're in charge, and you have 240 members. All you needed was 218. What is your plan, however, between now and 6:30 p.m. on Wednesday to get us off this dime?
But I'd watch your words, friend, because I'm going to look forward to seeing how well you do with the new faction coming in on your side.
Interesting warning there. Joining us now is Washington Examiner commentary editor Tim Carney. Tim, thank you for coming on this morning. That was certainly an interesting moment, a fiery exchange. I do believe, however, it ended with the exchange of candy and a smile and a happy holidays. But for the time being, we watched that exchange and wonder if this is a sign of what's to come in the new Congress.
Well, Kevin McCarthy is trying to give exactly the warning that to the Democrats that, hey, being in the majority isn't that easy. Now, Steny Hoyer has been in majority leadership previously after the 2006 election, before the Tea Party changed it back in 2010. But the Republicans just have had a horrible time trying to figure out how to piece together majority when they have 240 seats. It's just a very different era. After the Tea Party, after online fundraising, after earmarks went away, it's really hard to cobble together a majority. And so when Hoyer is there kind of talking trash, McCarthy says, you guys have a very interesting class of freshmen coming in. Not just Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who will protest at Pelosi's office, but a lot of others. So in some ways, I thought Kevin McCarthy was sort of sending a message, hey, guess what? You're going to feel this pain soon too.
It was an interesting warning. Hoyer specifically took issue with that moment in the Oval Office this week where the president said that he would be proud to shut down the government over border security. He fumed, what kind of irresponsibility is that? What did you think as we look back? We lost audio with you, Tim. Can you hear me?
Call the shot.
All right. We were fighting to get that shot up. We got it up. We were so excited it was there. And that was Tim Carney at the Washington Examiner. But if I could just continue, what Hoyer was going off on was the president's warning. He was proud to tout that he would proudly shut down the government over border security. And Hoyer did not like that.
I thought what Ken Paxton said from Texas 30 minutes ago. He said it's worth it. You don't often hear politicians talking that way, but the president's talked about it too. Regardless, next week's going to be very interesting. It's going to hold a lot of dramas, this what they do in Washington.
And meanwhile, lawmakers are skipping town. There's no plan in sight, publicly, privately. You don't know where this is going to go. It's going to make for a pretty dramatic end of the year.
We're here.
Bill Hemmer, we're here.
All right, 22 minutes before the hour. Late last night, if you're watching on Big Fox, the LA Chargers came back from a 14-point deficit. They stunned the Kansas City Chiefs at home. 29-28. Phillip Rivers clinched a 1-yard TD pass to Mike Williams, followed up by a 2-point conversion. Talk about pressure. They secure the victory with a 2-point conversion on the road. The teams now sit in a virtual tie atop the AFC West division.
Big comeback, for sure.
I mean, great victory for the LA Chargers.
Did you catch any of that last night? I'm just,
I mean, we had our little shindig.
We were having a little Christmas party. We've got some pictures.
Was that a capital S or a small S for shindig? How would you rate that? I'd say capital.
Perfect. Yeah. All right. Well, the Senate sending a strong message to President Trump and the Saudis. A group of bipartisan group of lawmakers passing a resolution to cut U.S. military support to the civil war in Yemen. We will tell you what this all means, plus this.
Under no circumstances do I want to embarrass the President of the United States of America. The truth is, I told the truth. I took responsibility for my actions.
Michael Cohen breaks his silence, wide-ranging interview, a lot left on the table. We'll work through it in a moment here when we talk to Alan Dershowitz, who has an awful lot to say about all these ongoing matters. He's coming up live next.
So what happened is either Cohen